I'm Ben Wiesman. I was born May 2nd, 1931 in Omaha, Nebraska. My mother and father, my father came here from Romania in the early 1900s. My mother came from Odessa, Russia, about the same time, in the early 1900s. My father's father had come from Romania in the late 1890s and brought a couple of the older children with him from Romania who could work, and he was a watchmaker and a clockmaker, but he also had a second job as a baker, and the older daughters that he brought with him worked to earn money to bring the rest of the family that came in the very early 1900s from Romania with their mother. On my mother's side, her family had come from Russia also in the 1900s, and her father at the time was a peddler, like a lot of the Jewish immigrants were.
Ben, what brought your mother and father to Omaha?
Well, I think the thing that brought them, number one, was religious persecution where they were, and not as much freedom for the religion. And the other thing was, is other people had come here to Omaha earlier from their area who the family had known. My father's father, is a watchmaker, had known quite a few people in Romania who had come here and settled in Omaha and in the Midwest. And because of them, he chose Omaha also. My mother's parents, it was a similar situation, that people knew other people that had settled here in the early 1900s. And the opportunities here, I guess, were better, they felt, than back east. They came in through, my mother's parents came in through Baltimore, and they felt that conditions were better here financially and opportunity-wise, and that's why they came to the Midwest.
How did your mother and dad meet?
That's interesting. I'm not totally sure, really, of how they met.
Were they married here in Omaha?
Yes, they were married here in Omaha, and they met in Omaha. And my father had served in the First World War in the Navy, and that's how he became a citizen. And I'm not quite sure how they met. I assume because so many of the people lived in an area in the general area of 24th and Lake, or Clark Street, in that general area, that they lived within that neighborhood area, and they were probably introduced by people in the neighborhood who got them together, and they married.
How many siblings do you have, Ben?
I have 2 sisters, 1 brother, so there's a total of 4 of us.
Can you tell me a little bit about them?
Sure. 2 of my sisters live here in Omaha. My sister Ann is married to William Wolfson, and she's my oldest sister. And my sister Betty is married to Sam Alloy, who lives here in Omaha also. They're all retired now. My brother Dan lives in Alabama, and he had joined the Navy prior to Pearl Harbor in 1940, and because he was in the service for so long through the whole war and everything, and was going to get called back in the later wars we had, he made that his career and just stayed in, and he's retired now, and he lives in Alabama.
Ben, what are some of your earliest recollections of growing up, where you lived and so on?
Well, some of the things I can remember from way back, I remember going to shul with my father, and I believe it was the Reika shul. And here in later years, I saw that my grandfather, Barish Wiesman, that I was named for, was secretary of that shul on the incorporation papers that I saw at the Historical Society exhibit, except they had spelled our name wrong, which people always do. But there was only one Barish, but it was spelled W-I-S-E-M-A-N instead of W-I-E-S-M-A-N. So he was one of the incorporators of that shul early on. And I remember as that shul evolved, and it was in a house, of going to services there as a very young child, and people would pound on the tables, and it was extremely noisy. And I remember that, and I was just extremely young then. And then I remember working in my father's grocery store. My father had grocery stores in North Omaha, about 3 of them that I can remember, from very early times. And I remember being like 7 or 8 years old and putting potatoes in sacks and weighing them, like 10 pounds of potatoes. And I remember sweeping the floors and doing things as a very young child at his grocery store, and then working in there for quite a few years after school and as I was growing up. I remember my bar mitzvah. I remember when my parents, we belonged both to Beth El and Beth Israel. And this went back way before I was born, I guess, probably in the 30s, earlier than when I was born. But my parents wanted me to have a more religious bar mitzvah, and so I was taught toward the Orthodox leanings instead of the conservative of Beth El in the early years up until my bar mitzvah, which was held at Beth Israel. And Rabbi Moshowitz, I remember him, who became quite renowned in the United States after he left here. But I remember my bar mitzvah at Beth Israel.
Do you remember
on 18th
studying
in Chicago? Yes, I remember studying for it, and I remember that very vividly, because I also, because of going to school and working, I had a private tutor, Mr. Rotkovich, who was very strict, and he would pound on our dining room table when he taught me, and he would come in 3 times a week to teach me, as well as the teachers from Beth Israel, because it was a long Haftorah and a long service, and in those days you conducted a much greater part of the service than they do today. You really had a very lengthy preparations to learn for everything. And yes, I remember that pretty vividly.
Aside from the ceremony, what are your recollections of your bar mitzvah compared to today's parties and so on?
Oh, it was much more conservative than that. It was we had, afterwards, reception on Saturday and lunch, but it was not like today's, not like the set menu of today. It was different. It was more of a whole meal, a big meal, and it was, in the afternoon on Saturday. So it was quite a lengthy occasion that after the service it went on till maybe, as I remembered, in the early afternoon, like 2:30, 3 o'clock. It was fairly big deal. But it wasn't the night parties, or it wasn't the Friday night. This was an Orthodox service, and it was, I don't remember anything on Friday night that I had done, but Saturday was really a very lengthy day and a big service.
If we go back to your elementary school, what are your recollections?
Well, I went to Lothrop School on the north side, and they were really good recollections, and it was kind of interesting because when I look back and think about that, we must, as Jewish children, we must not have had the prejudice that I saw later in life, because it was an integrated school and there were black people at the school, and I believe I was the only Jewish person in my class. No, I'll take that back. Blanche Steinberg. There was one other person. Blanche Steinberg was the second Jewish person in my class. And she went through grade school at the same time I did, and we were in the same class for a lot of the times. And but I can recall it was very good as far as black and white and religious things coming into it. And I remember it as a good time and a happy time, and a lot of those associations from school, and I'm thinking of some of the black people who I in later life, like Pittman Foxall, who became a police chief, and others who in the black community that did well. I think Lothrop gave us all a very good background, and there were strict teachers, extremely strict, because if you didn't have things done, you stayed after school. If you misbehaved, you stayed. There wasn't any calling of the parents or anything. You just stayed. You had a problem and you had to make it right. So things were much stricter, and but you learned at the same time. But there were a lot of good times in grade school, and then I'd gone to Central High, and I remember good times there also. I started working at Brandeis at the age of 14 while I was going to Central, and I started out as a stock boy, and I gradually worked my way up to sales clerk, and then to an assistant buyer, and then to the buyer of hardware on the 5th floor of Brandeis. And then that kind of expanded over into the major appliances like TV and washing machines, refrigerators, and at that time we called them white goods, in the appliance industry, and housewares was on the 5th floor, and the 6th floor also became a part. And then I assisted the merchandise manager, but I worked there every day after school at Central, and then also on Saturdays. And in those years they were open late, a good deal of the time, till 8 o'clock every night. But then I kind of liked that business of hardware and housewares and appliances a lot. And actually I was the buyer for hardware at the age of 19 and was the youngest buyer that Brandeis had ever had. And it was an interesting opportunity. I didn't earn much money at Brandeis, but the learning experience was really something that I think was well worth it, because you had Carl Lewis and people who were excellent merchandising people that were well known in their field, and I do think I learned a lot from them.
Do you happen to remember what your salary was in those years?
Yes. For 42 hours a week when I started as a stock boy, it was $14.82 after deductions for 42 hours. And then as I rose in the ranks, I think the highest it ever was I think it was $76 after deductions. So, you know, of course in those years I bought a lot of things, but by today's standards that wouldn't even be enough to live by yourself anywhere. So they were extremely low salaries, and but as I said, it was really a learning experience and a training experience, and it did let me go on to other things. I left Brandeis and went into service and went into the Korean War. I do have a picture if you want to see it. It is from when I went into service at basic training in 1951. It was during the Korean War, and that particular picture was used at my 50th anniversary party. So if you see, or when I was 50 years old, I'm sorry. So if you see signatures or things around the sides, those were people who inscribed happy 50th birthday and things like that. But that was an interesting time going into service, because I think those were my dress clothes, not my fatigues or anything. But I think that took me that really learned me quite a bit of discipline and structure when I was in service. That kind of brings to mind, I once on a Saturday, we had gone to the mess hall, or we were in formation to go to the mess hall for lunch, and we went to the mess hall, and I left the mess hall and went back to the break room, because it was on Saturday, and that's when you wrote letters or things that you had to do. You could do them, but I went back to a break room and picked up my pad that I was writing letters on and got it. Well, I ran into the sergeant on the company street, and because I had left a formation, which they considered even lunch a formation, I had to stand at attention on the company street for the rest of that whole day until dinner that night. And that was kind of to teach a lesson, I suppose, to me and the others, that you don't leave a formation, and you do just what you're ordered to do by the numbers. And that was kind of a strict example, but it's something I think I learned from. And I think everything is a learning experience, and even the Army was a learning experience also. I want to visit a little bit about my days at Central. Even though I worked each day after school, there were times that I either went in later to work, but I was quite active in extracurricular activities at Central, and I must have kind of leaned toward the business end of matters, because I was the business editor of the Central High Register, and I was either the business manager or in a few cases the general manager of a lot of the operas or operettas and the plays that were held at Central. And I plan to go back when I go through my boxes of programs and things that I saved, some of those programs to pull the information of what part I had played in each of those. I know I had a few minor roles in some of the dramatic plays, like You Can't Take It With You, and I know I was in the Mikado and the Pirates of Penzance and a lot of the Gilbert and Sullivan things from the operettas. But then when in my junior and senior year, I was asked to have been business manager of these for the financial end of it, and for in some cases, like if we sold ads for things, I kind of headed those things up where we had ad campaigns and people sold ads, and we put together programs or books, or in some cases they were single sheet type programs, but they had ads on them to pay for it, so that we tried to make them self-sustaining so the school didn't have to put any money into those. I know I took part in some intramural sports, and I think the coach's name was Mr. Eckfeld, Vernon Eckfeld, I think, and Frank Napple, I believe, was one of the teachers that was active in sports and things like that, and I think J. Arthur Nelson was principal. I went around primarily with a lot of Jewish kids, and we kind of hung together in groups. I didn't belong to any specific club like AZA or Ronos or ZBT. No, that was college, let's see, or the other ones that were in high school, because the time that I had after school I spent in extracurricular clubs that were connected with school, or with a few of the sports activities. I enjoyed wrestling, but I wasn't very good at it. But those things, I tried to engage in some of them when I wasn't working after school. But the things that I really took part in were either usually before school or slightly after school for a short time. There's a whole list of clubs, I mean a lot of them, that I took part in that are in the O book, and when I find the Central High O book, the junior and senior years, and we can see all of those. I enjoyed high school. It seemed to go by fast. And then when it was over, I worked for a while at Brandeis, like I mentioned, and gradually became a buyer there by the age of 19, and then went into service.
Tell me a little bit about your service years.
Okay, I think that at the time I look back on those as kind of a time that was somewhat difficult. Fortunately, I got through them okay, and I got out in 1953 in the fall, almost the fall or winter of 1953. I didn't go to officers candidate school. I could have. I really didn't want to be an officer. I didn't want to be committed for, at that time you had to be committed for a total of, I believe, 8 years. And I chose not to do that, so I was only an enlisted man. And I really, I kind of was laid back when I was in service and let others do the leading, and I kind of did the following. I got to be a corporal, and I was squad leader of 9 men, and that's as high as I went. And when I got out of service, I was very happy and returned back to Omaha to get into the business world. So that was a period of time, like I mentioned earlier, that I think I learned discipline, strict discipline, and some things really that you just learned to grin and bear it and be quiet when you saw people a lot of times who were leading you, who were maybe not the brightest or the sharpest, but they were your leaders and you followed orders.
Where are some of the places you were stationed in the service?
Well, I stayed stateside. I did go TDY, which was on short periods of travel time to outside of the country, but primarily I was in Fort Riley, Kansas. I was in Arkansas. I was at Camp Crowder in Missouri. I was in Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, Indiana at the Adjutant General School. From the Adjutant General School I had TDY, and I had been overseas in Japan and then back again to Fort Benjamin Harrison. When I returned from service, I had had experience with appliances, both television and white goods, and I had the opportunity to join Seidel's company, which was headquartered here in Omaha, and they covered Nebraska, Iowa, a little bit of Kansas, and a little bit of the Dakotas, and I had the chance to join them in their appliance departments, and that was in 1954, early 1954, and I went in basically with, as an assistant really, with advertising with appliances, and the job grew, and they were the largest automotive distributor in the United States with over 100 branches, and they were in other areas as well. And the job grew, and I took over as advertising, and then later added promotion manager of the both the television and the white goods, which were washing machines and freezers, refrigerators, all the household appliances, and then automotive goods. And that job grew into something quite large. We had a department that handled co-op advertising, where we paid for stores like Brandeis and Paramount Radio Shop and all the appliance stores here in Omaha to run ads. We would pay 50% of the ads, and the manufacturers would reimburse us, and that had people who worked for me that measured the ads, and then we rebilled the manufacturers, and we made promotions where the manufacturers would tie in with us. For instance, this was in 1954 through the period of 1960 that I was with Seidel's. And we added to advertising and sales promotion, sales training, and other factors, which were marketing and merchandising. So it became quite a big job, and we made our own ads up here in Omaha. We used local ad agencies that became part of national ad campaigns. And these became, these were like full-page ads in color, and we had whole sections of the World Herald and other publications here that became prototypes for newspapers in other cities around the country. And this was really probably one of my best growth periods of my career, and when I made the fastest advancement. My wages were good. Remember, I said I started in 1954, and my wages advanced, and I met my wife shortly after that, and we were married in 1956. I could afford to have a wife then, and that reminds me that in 1954, I also bought my very first property. It was a duplex, and it was near 42nd and Farnham, and I paid it $1,000 down for it, and I think it was slightly under $20,000. It was a duplex in the medical, what later became the medical area. And that started me out on a real estate career in 1954, where I would buy properties primarily in that area around the Med Center, what today is the Med Center, and west in Dundee, and I would try to pay as little down as possible. Like that one I mentioned was $1,000. I think usually the most I paid down was $2,500, and I started acquiring rental properties that were duplexes and sixplexes and larger. And at the same time, I was doing the work that I did at Seidel's, which gave me the additional funds that I could invest them on the side in rental properties. And this was, like I said, this was a real important time of my life, because it was something creative with advertising, and also something to supplement my income, which was the real estate properties. We got a home in 1957, prior to having our first child in 1958, and that's my oldest son, Mark, when he was born. And we had a home, a small brick home, and I can remember it was a 5644 grant. And after Mark was born, we had a pin in Yaban with Rabbi Kripke officiating at our home and in our backyard area. And we had a lot of people. I can remember that very vividly. It was a very happy time. My son David was born in 1960 while we lived in that same home. And, well, of course, we'd grown as a family, a young family, I should say. And things were going very well in the job for me. And people, while I was in Chicago, while I was at Seidel's, we had a good team. We had a good marketing team and a sales team, and the promotion funds that we had were very good for us, because we would come up with suggested campaigns, and RCA from their headquarters and Whirlpool from their headquarters would make the funds available that we wanted, not only for Seidel's as the distributor, but for all of our dealers. And we soon became we had the highest penetration of color TVs in the United States. 1 out of every 2 sold was an RCA. And for Whirlpool, 1 out of every 3 washing machines was a Whirlpool washing machine. And these were very big figures for the whole country. And both Whirlpool and RCA had taken notice of that, but also Westinghouse had, who were a large appliance distributor. And in 1960, Westinghouse flew me back on a private plane to their headquarters in Pittsburgh and wanted me to go to work to them at the national level as their advertising and their promotion manager. And Anna went with me also, and we didn't necessarily like Pittsburgh. I'll never forget seeing the Alcoa steel headquarters. It was an all aluminum, not steel, Alcoa aluminum, I'm sorry. It was an all aluminum building, first time I'd ever seen one. And I loved architecture, and I liked buildings, and I liked property also. But that wasn't the reason. We didn't really care for Pittsburgh a lot, so we chose not to accept the job with Westinghouse. Well, evidently, the word must have gotten out that we went back there to interview, and I had calls from both RCA in New York and from Whirlpool in Benton Harbor, Michigan, that they would like to talk with me. And so we went back and interviewed at both places. Well, we didn't like New York, frankly, to live there, or necessarily the suburbs to commute. So we turned down RCA, and we liked Whirlpool because it was right on Lake Michigan, where they were located, which was St. Joe and Benton Harbor, Michigan. Beautiful area, beautiful beaches, and the incentives to go with both of those companies by Omaha standards were very, very large and very good to consider, including stock options. And so it was really, I think, probably one of the biggest decisions that we had made was to leave Omaha and to join Whirlpool in Benton Harbor, Michigan. When I advised Seidels that I was going to leave and go to Whirlpool, they were extremely upset. And I should add here, I was the only Jew that had ever worked at Seidels. I don't know if they ever hired any even after me. Out of over 800 employees, I was the only one. And I had a very fine mentor there who was Victor Toft, who was on the foundation and the boards of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and was just a fine gentleman. And he was quite understanding that I had such a good opportunity, but Harry Seidels was very upset, and I don't know if he ever forgave me for leaving. But I felt we had done very well at Seidels, and they certainly had done very well, and they had tremendous growth during that period. So I felt that when I did leave, there were little hard feelings that I did leave. And like I said, I was the only Jew before that, and after that, there were never any other Jews that were hired at Seidels. But when I was at Seidels, I also participated in a lot of civic affairs, and I was extremely active in the Junior Chamber of Commerce and was president. I was active in Dundee, Kiwanis. I have some plaques over there that I can show you of these various organizations that were given to me. I headed up the fund drive for the Salvation Army Kettle Day Drive. This was at a very young age. I was still in my early 20s. There are all kinds of events, civic events that I had taken place or that I had been involved with here in Omaha. I headed up the Cerebral Palsy Drive, and that was with, I got to know some people here in Omaha, like Marge Durham, who's Chuck Durham's wife, and Peg Cowdery, who was Ben Cowdery's wife, from the World Herald. They were extremely active in cerebral palsy and wanted me to be their campaign fundraiser chairman, which I was, and there are plaques over there, and we did extremely well on raising funds. The Cowdery daughter had cerebral palsy, and Peg Cowdery was very active. So I was getting pretty well known to people of the World Herald and to different civic leaders in the city through these activities, and was awarded a number of plaques and at dinners, and was really had some nice honors. I enjoyed doing the civic work as well as my work at Seidel, so it was, like I said, it was an important time in life of growing up in a company that was a strong company, and getting involved civically, and having a home life with a couple of new young children. That was really quite a wonderful time of my life. Was given to me in December of 1959, and I had headed up their campaign to get them membership and help them grow. And this was a very, very strong organization that met at the Blackstone Hotel in the House and Garden Rooms in the very top. And they gave that to me because we achieved the membership that we wanted, and this grew to be a real powerhouse group, almost as large as the downtown Kiwanis group. And so they awarded me that at a dinner one evening, which came to me as a surprise. During the years from about 1957 to 1959, I was given quite a few plaques, and some of them had more meaning to me than others. This one that you see in front of you, the Salvation Army for the Tree of Lights, is a Christmas time event, as you know, and I headed that up for Dundee Kiwanis, and then later on you'll see another plaque for the Junior Chamber of Commerce, which was a much bigger group, and they wanted me then to be general chairman of the entire drive, and I wasn't able to do that because I didn't have the time. But the point that I'm making is that regardless that it was for a Christian group or oftentimes for the synagogue, when I can help and when I had the time to help with primarily in fund drives or campaigns or membership drives, I tried to do that as much as I could to do the civic duty that I thought I owed to the community, to the city, and to the individual clubs that I belonged to. Active in the Junior Chamber of Commerce in the 50s, starting with about 56 through 1960 actually, and was an officer in the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and at one point I also headed up the Kettle Day drive for the Tree of Lights for the Salvation Army, and this was lining up literally 80-some people to ring bells on the corner of 16th and Douglas, where Brandeis department store was, on all four corners, to get money thrown into the kettle for the Salvation Army during the holiday season. That was a very, very big event in those years. This plaque was awarded to me by the Junior Chamber of Commerce for civic achievement because we had participated in so many different events, and because I was very active. And that was at the time that the Omaha Junior Chamber had the national president, who was Hugh McKenna, and there were really a lot of young men that were active who were slightly older than me, like McKenna and Jim Borland. Some were my same age that I made good friendships with, like Mickey Skinner, who later became head of Skinner Macaroni, and a lot of good guys who we really had good camaraderie with in the mid-50s when we were really doing a lot civic-wise here in the area, and when I was still with Seidel's here in Omaha. This plaque was awarded to me by Delta Sigma Pi, and this was very unusual because I primarily went to the University of Nebraska at Omaha in the evenings. There were certain courses that I had to take during the day, and so I got in those courses primarily at 4 or 5, like accounting, for instance, which was a 4-hour course, and some of the others that were, and I got my degree while I carried a full-time job at Seidel's company. And I also became president of Delta Sigma Pi, which is a business fraternity. And we had really good membership and good guys in there who went out into the community and a lot of them are retired now, pretty strong business leaders like Mickey Skinner and others. And it was quite a nice thing to be president of the chapter and also to associate and work with people who became future business leaders. I was going to join Whirlpool in St. Joe in Benton Harbor, Michigan in 1960, and just before we left the city was the first time that I had ventured into commercial property, and in 1960 bought, it was a Northwestern Bell coin center where they counted the coins from the telephones on near 88th and L Street. And that was the first commercial building I bought. The other tenant in that building was Security International, which was an armored car service. And like I said, this was in 1960. But these were predecessors of what was to become really a growth and a very important time of the real estate business that I enjoyed so well. It also got us into, with both of those companies, we had constructed vaults for their coin center, vaults and counting rooms actually, and for Security International that was an armored car delivery service. And this got us involved in the construction of very well designed and very large vaults that became quite important to us. Later on, when we were doing more building to suit, we built the vaults for what is now the Wells Fargo Armored Car Service and Brinks on California Street in downtown Omaha. And very few people even knew who was located there other than seeing the trucks drive inside to the building to unload the armored cars. And this was on near 18th and California Street, between 17th and 18th, and right near California. And these were especially designed, and we formed a very good relationship with Wells Fargo. This was a period then that I was getting ready to leave to join Whirlpool in Michigan, and we did that. I started in as advertising and promotion manager for refrigerators, freezers, and air conditioners for all of their cold products. And that was a very interesting time because Whirlpool was growing quite rapidly, and I had the opportunity then to take over more of the appliance lines, all of them that they'd carried, and became advertising and sales promotion manager and sales training manager was one of the next steps up the line. And then at that time I added ranges, washing machines, dryers, and all of the Whirlpool products. So my job was growing, the departments were growing, and the number of people that I supervised were growing all the time, and this was a very interesting and very challenging time. It also was a nice time for my young family and me, because when we went there we had 2 children, and our family grew. We had 2 more children there. Stephen, my 3rd son, and my 4th son, Bill or William, were born there in Michigan while I was with Whirlpool. It was really a nice place to live, and we enjoyed it. Anna and I became active in the synagogue. While we were there, I had the good fortune to be chairman of the synagogue building committee and fundraising committee, and we built a new synagogue. There were approximately 150 to 200 Jewish families there in the area, and it was tough to raise funds to build a synagogue, but it was a very enjoyable and rewarding time. I was with Whirlpool, and I joined them in 1960, late 1960, and I had mentioned that we had had 2 children when we went to Whirlpool in 1960. While there, Ann and I also became active with the Jewish community. Our children were young, and they had an old synagogue that was really dilapidated. And when we became active with the synagogue, I was asked to work on their design committee and their architectural committee for building a new synagogue. And this was very enjoyable. We we went ahead and were able to build a synagogue, and we raised enough funds to get it started and to complete the majority of it, but we had to take out a mortgage to be able to finish completing the inside. And I learned a good experience that it was easier to raise funds, and I was campaign chairman for building the first part of the synagogue, but when you have to go back to people and ask for additional funds to pay off the mortgage and to complete the synagogue, that is extremely difficult. And so we designed a flip chart, and I had good people on the committee to work with me to take pictures, but I remember composing the wording to raise funds and to design a chart that we could meet with someone either in their home or their office and go through this large chart and try to get pledges from them to help pay off our mortgage and really to complete the rest of the synagogue. We were very successful. We were able to do that, and we had a beautiful synagogue for 150 to 200 families that to this day is really, really a very, very nice structure. This is a flip chart that we use to raise funds for the new synagogue, and this is the main sanctuary portion, and this goes further back into the school. Very well laid out. I continue to stay active in commercial real estate, and my parents, my father especially, was here, and he looked after the commercial real estate that we had been acquiring. And also what I had done is I had started to sell off the residential type, the duplexes and the apartments that I had while I was at Whirlpool, because it was easier to take care of the commercial, and you had we had strong tenants and very good accounts, and we were selective in what we bought, so it was easier for my father, frankly, to take care of. And we did sell off all of the residential properties, and then from about 1961 on, concentrated only in commercial real estate. I would come back to Omaha, though, also on a regular basis. My wife and I and the children would, to visit our parents. We had always been very close to our parents, and my sisters and the rest of my family who lived here in Omaha. And we would come back frequently to visit, and I would check the properties also when I would come back. In the meantime, my career had been blossoming with Whirlpool, and one thing that was really a very notable experience was while at Whirlpool, I had the opportunity to start the very first 800 phone number in the United States, and I had to also work out the campaign to get that number used by the general public. And so in the 60s, if you remember, there was a hotline with the Kremlin. So that wasn't an 800 number, by the way, but that was a direct phone between Washington and the Kremlin to prevent an atomic war. And so we came up with a cold line because of Whirlpool products. And this was the very first 800 number for the United States that we worked out with AT&T. And primarily it started out for service when people were having problems with appliances, to be able to answer their questions regarding the appliance. And it was a 24-hour-a-day phone number that anyone could call, and we had a massive advertising and promotion campaign. Well, it was extremely successful. It really helped Whirlpool and set it on the map for all appliance manufacturers because of this new service we offered. I realized that this had a great potential, calling 1-800 number where you could never do that before. And I happened to know Mr. Pritzker, Mr. A.N. Pritzker, who was the founder and headed up the Hyatt Hotels. He was the grandfather of the people that run it now. And I used to vacation with my parents and my family in Miami Beach at a Hyatt hotel. And Mr. Pritzker used to walk around the swimming pool. He was he would remind you of a typical elderly Jewish gentleman who would walk around the swimming pool greeting everyone, remembering names of people. and asking them questions about the services and everything else they offered. He was just a nice, nice gentleman. And we struck up a conversation one day, and I talked to him about the 800 number and what a service this would be for hotels to be able to call one number and advertise one number and to get hotel reservations anywhere that they had hotels. And he liked the idea also. And his sons were pretty well running the business now, and he spent a lot of time down in Miami. And we were able to convince them to give Omaha a try, because they had been answering and making reservations at all the individual hotels they had. And they did have a central place in Burlingame, California, but I was able really to do a pretty good job on selling Omaha, and they came into Omaha to look at it. Well, at that time I was still with Whirlpool. I didn't have any buildings that I could put them in, and they were real excited about this concept. And so they were going to give it a try, and I encouraged them to do it because it was in the early stages of 800 numbers, and there were bugs to be worked out and things to be done. Especially, it was one thing to do this for Whirlpool, for one company and one service with a central place, and it was another thing to do it for hotels scattered all over. And but I realized there was great potential there, and so I started thinking of coming back to Omaha, where I could really get into this business. So I gave Whirlpool almost a year's notice that I would be leaving. And fortunately, we had a strong department in Whirlpool, a strong marketing department. I had excellent people there, really, that I worked with and who are friends to this day, those that are still living. And I went ahead then and left Whirlpool after giving them the year's notice and returned to Omaha. After returning to Omaha, I knew that Hyatt wasn't real pleased with where they were leasing and what they had, and they needed to grow and grow fast. And so I was able to work with them and to put them in, whether it was a coincidence or what happened, but I had one of the buildings that we had, the tenant went bankrupt. And that was a few times I ever had a tenant go bankrupt and where I had a loss, a big loss. But fortunately Hyatt came along and Hyatt could use that building, and it was at 90th and Maplewood, right near 90th and Maple, and I was able to gut the building out and redo it on very short notice to turn it into the Hyatt Reservation Center. And that really started the first reservation center on a big time scale for Omaha. There was one 800 number service here that had combined a whole lot of services into an 800 number that went bankrupt. That was not ours, thank goodness. And Hyatt desperately needed to get with someone and get with someone quick where they could use this 800 number concept. From there, our business started to grow and to mushroom. We went from Hyatt to, well, there are a lot of ones in between that we put into buildings, but we designed probably the most unique one was at 78th and Crown Point for Ramada and Days Inn, both in the same building. And it was a smart building, what later became known, and we called it that at that time. I think we were the first ones ever to use that name for a building because it was designed and built from the ground up for a specific purpose, which was a reservation center. And it had command modules where there were 4 pods and a central command station. It's almost like a space center, like you saw the Space Center in Florida, where you had 80 people per pod, of 4 pods, that's 320 people, and a central command center in case anything went wrong, where you had all these phone calls coming in for Ramada and Days Inn. And around that, you had things to be concerned about. The electronics were massive. We worked with 12 suppliers primarily, like IBM, Collins Radio in Cedar Rapids, a lot of different companies who had to do things specifically for our building so it could be totally automated. We had one of the earliest ACDs, which was an automatic call director that routed the calls to the specific agents and then tied it into the computers. This was a massive undertaking. Electronics were as much as the building and the equipment. And this was when the whole facility was done with the executive staff and everyone else. It was almost 400 people in the building per shift. So we had to be concerned about air and the quality of air, which after that period became an important thing in other buildings as well. We had to circulate the air very rapidly and heat it or chill it. Frankly, we had to chill more than heat because the body heat of the people, and to take out the perspiration smells was a very big concern. So we were normally even cooling in the wintertime. And some of the earliest things that we came up with were dealing with air conditioning manufacturers to fix those air conditioners so they could work in the coldest Omaha weather so they wouldn't freeze up and conk out, even in the winter when we were we were bringing in fresh air from the outside and either chilling it or heating it. So these were massive things that had to be worked out, and air handling and air quality was an extremely important thing, as it is today. And then bathrooms. You can imagine how many bathrooms we had to have with 320 people there, and people took breaks on shifts. I think we probably have some of the largest banks of bathrooms in the city of Omaha in a private building. I'm ruling out the Quest Center and things like that, but in a private building, we had very large amounts of space for bathrooms and for break rooms and for all the other amenities that are needed, individual lockers, parking, where your parking overlapped, where you had to get in large amounts of people so you could change shifts flawlessly without losing any calls. And that was the first smart building in the United States, and that I'm very proud of. There are a lot of things unique with that building that people came in to study. We had done work at that time for the major hotel chains in the United States. There's a appraisal service. They're not located in Omaha. They're called Means, and they had compiled information on us that they were supplying to others, where we had slightly over 60% of the total reservation centers of the United States were our tenants. We had done consulting work for Marriott, for Holiday Inns, for others. Oftentimes those people came into our buildings, and most of the time I was aware of it, and they were copying our unique things that we had developed, such as that building at 78th and Crown Point had no power poles. All of the cabling, which is massive, was in the floor in trenches. There wasn't even a raised floor in that building, and that was unique. In some of the buildings that we did, we had raised floors, which were extremely expensive. This one we had trenches, poured concrete trenches that we ran to give a network underneath these positions that we had had, and it was less expensive to do that. So Holiday Inn and Marriott, of course, were extremely interested, and in some cases they paid us consultant fees. Marriott did. Most of the others did also, and would come in and we allowed them to take photographs and to sketch systems that we had done to make this building the unique building that it was, a true smart building. It also was a good time for me to meet people from these hotels, like Mr. Pritzker. The Isbell family headed up Ramada, and at that time Ramada was the second largest hotel chain in the United States, had a huge number of rooms. Days Inn was very large, so I got really to meet and deal with a lot of their executives on the top level when we made our presentations to them. And like Means had said, we had over 60% of the business. That started spilling off into other areas where we worked with Avis Telemarketing. We had built for Allied Van Lines, we had built the National Dispatch Center here in Omaha that dispatched all the moving vans for North America and brought their entire operation here. Some of these buildings that we built, we had large events when we would break ground or when they would open, and we'd have, in the case of Allied Van Lines, we had all of their offices, their entire board of directors. We took over at a country club and had a dinner and dancing and some nice events where they met the city leaders. And we put on some very nice public relations events for these people during these years. This plaque was given to the board of directors and the officers of Allied Van Lines for the groundbreaking of their National Dispatch and Operations Center in July of 1980. We had invited the entire group in, and they came in various chartered airplanes. These were people who serve on the board that own moving companies across the United States and North America, for that matter. And it was quite a big event for Omaha. And we presented all of them, and there were, I think, some 30 directors and then officers on top of that, so I think that involved about 50 or so of the plaques. And we held events here for the groundbreaking. They also held their board of directors meeting, their annual meeting, the first time ever in Omaha, Nebraska, because of the center being built here. We also brought in their wives and other members of their family and had a number of social events with the governor and the mayor and the business leaders of Omaha to entertain these people. This shovel was given, a silver-plated shovel was given to every board of directors member, as well as the governor and the mayor of Omaha, and everyone that took place in the groundbreaking ceremony for the Allied Van Lines Dispatch Center, and it's at I-680 and 4th Street in our business park that we built up there. And each person was presented this plated shovel and actually took part in the groundbreaking. And it was extensively covered by the media, not only in Omaha, but national publications came into town for the event.
Was
Was given to the directors and board members that came in from Reservations Unlimited for the groundbreaking in 1984. This was an unusual, or is an unusual company, because Reservations Unlimited, that most people would not have heard of, actually handles the reservations for the majority of the international hotels like Trust Forte, Omni Dumphy, just a tremendous number of hotels. I can't even remember all of them now. Some of the local ones were Thrifty Scott. There were like 50 or 60 smaller hotel chains that were international that are handled by this company, and they grew quite large, and in fact they outgrew the building we originally built for them after about 3 years. And they were an outstanding company, and their officers and people came in town for the groundbreaking.
Ben, it's amazing that from that original 800 number, what evolved here in Omaha.
Well, I have to agree with you, because really we brought many new companies to Omaha, large corporations that had never been here before, like ITT, HP, at that time was Compaq. There are so many of them. There's probably, I could gather our list for you, I think there's like 80 companies on that list that had looked at Omaha and passed it and came to Omaha to establish an operation here in Omaha. And of course this meant thousands of jobs, and it really turned out to be bigger, you know, than what I thought it would be. And we tried to encourage them all to relocate only in Omaha if we could. We had to turn down some business. Sheraton Hotels came to us to build in St. Louis for them, and we tried to encourage them that they should locate in Omaha, but they chose not to. And so we turned down their business and passed it up, and we had done that with others also. But another reason for that, we were so swamped during the 70s and early 80s with build-to-suit and leasebacks and the construction end of it and the design and the planning end, that we knew we could only handle so much efficiently and to be complete and to be meticulous about it. And so we did have to pass up some business, and at the time it hurt, but it had to be done. And we were told that in the 70s we became the largest exclusively commercial developer in the city of Omaha, and it was primarily because of 800 numbers and the telemarketing industry that we had brought here to Omaha. What we did then, we mentioned Allied Van Lines earlier. We started to build then, or develop, entire business parks where we would accumulate anywhere from 60 to 100 acres, such as what we did where Allied was at I-680 in Fort. It runs over to Military Road, that park does. We built one at 96th and L Street, where ITT is, Dial America, First Data, which is a very big lessee of ours. And there's some other big operations out there. We also acquired properties at 90th and Burt to Western, back to 93rd and Burt and Western. There was only one other building here at the time when we acquired them and started building them. But we also didn't turn our back on downtown. When others had left downtown and deserted it when the Hilton was built, which blocked off 16th Street. We didn't run away from it, and we had properties in downtown at the time. We continued to acquire more because we felt that a downtown was important for the growth of the city of Omaha. And there were some bad-looking buildings downtown that we acquired, but we think we improved the face of those buildings. As an example, there was an old dilapidated blood bank on the corner of 20th and Harney. It was in terrible condition, and we bought that and a few other buildings on Farnham between 20th and 24th and Harney, or 24th and Farnham, excuse me. Between 20th and 24th and Farnham, and we either rehabbed them and made them reusable, and fortunately were able to lease those buildings. We felt the one at 20th and Harney, that close to the city-county buildings and the courthouse, it couldn't remain that blood bank because it detracted so badly from the area. And there was a building behind it also that we acquired for additional parking. We did the same with the Flatiron. The Flatiron was in terrible shape. We rehabbed it. We built it out. There was when we purchased it, there was only one tenant there. The rest of the building, the ceiling had fallen down. Even frankly, it was terrible shape. And we restored the Flatiron to an elegant building, and were able to put a nice restaurant in there on the first floor. We bought the property around it to help shape that up. Across the street, we bought the Ballantine building. There was a rundown, shabby building where a boxing club was over there. We threw it down and cleared it out. Unfortunately, when we tried to buy the rest of the buildings in that area, and there are a couple of them still there that we don't own, the prices went up more than 20%, 20 times. So we couldn't really acquire them because it wouldn't have been feasible. But we actually restored the area, you might say, from 17th to 18th and St. Mary's and Howard Street there, and even further down up on 19th, where we threw down some of the older buildings and established parking there. Another challenge were the buildings on Farnham Street from 20th to 24th. It was largely a vagrant area. Once Nebraska Furniture and the other furniture stores like Peter Pan and Sol Lewis and Cappy's moved out of there, that was Furniture Row, and once they all vacated, the buildings there were not in good condition. And we bought most of the area from 20th to 24th except the Del Mar. That was another case where the price went up 20 times, and the buildings right next to it, and we couldn't acquire them. But the rest of them, we acquired them and threw them down, and we frankly got rid of the vagrant area that was in that region and cleaned up the area for downtown Omaha. So these were things that were costly and didn't give us the return that we should have gotten on funds invested by a long shot. But we felt that they helped downtown area, especially when you had the Orpheum Theater that was being restored, and the like I said, the government building so close by. We felt it was important to pitch in and help downtown. This plaque here was awarded to me, and it was an interesting dinner that evening because they brought up the point that I'd mentioned just previously, that when others vacated downtown and ran away when the Hilton was built, we stayed in downtown and helped to preserve it. And this plaque was awarded to me for helping to preserve downtown. It was the Downtown Omaha Visionary Pioneer Award, and it was for the restoration and the cleaning out of the vagrants and everything we did downtown. And they tied in a fairly long presentation about the achievements, which I can't cover here, all of them, but it was really a nice event that evening. In 2003, the Chamber of Commerce inducted me into the Omaha Business Hall of Fame for my role in the development of Omaha and for promoting the overall quality of life in Omaha. And this medal, which was put around my neck, and the award itself that you see there was presented to me at their annual dinner. During the time that we had come back to Omaha we moved back to Omaha from Michigan when I left Whirlpool. I'd given them, as you'll recall, a year's notice. That our family was quite active in Jewish activities. Anna was active in sisterhood, from working on committees to working her way up to vice president and president of the sisterhood in 1976 through 1978. And then locally, she was president of the region from 1982 to 1984. And I was active on committees in Men's Club and president of Men's Club in 1969 and 1970 at Bethel. And I was active in the new building, from helping to select the architect, who was kind of interesting. He probably built the majority of our buildings, but he was very confident, and he's probably one of the most liberal and non-anti-Semitic persons, he and his wife are, that I have ever met. And they were the lead architects with a specific synagogue architect from outside of Omaha to design the new Bethel. I certainly helped with the fundraising and even did inspections during the construction, or when there were any so-called problems. I was usually called to give advice on actual construction or matters that had been occurring. I couldn't take over the chairmanship of it because, having returned to Omaha just shortly before that, I was too busy in trying to reestablish my own business here, but I certainly did give a lot of time and effort for the selection of the architect and the design and even the fundraising. But I was active also in many other committees and was vice president and then president of Bethel in 1987 and 1988. I really, frankly, have enjoyed my work at Bethel. I had volunteered for over 25 years in Bethel activities, from ushering for the high holidays to helping bring food out of the kitchen from Lucy in the kitchen at Bethel, and putting it out on the table for the servers to get, and even serving sometimes myself. I served on the Federation Board and on the Jewish Press Board, and was president of the Jewish Press in 1994 and 1995, and assisted with the transition of the editors for the Jewish Press during that period. So I've really greatly enjoyed the work that I've done with the Jewish community and helping out in some way to make that community a stronger and more viable part of Omaha. I've been extremely fortunate for all my years to have a devoted and caring family. Unfortunately, a lot of my time was taken from them during business hours they could understand, but the civic things or the things for Bethel and other groups did take time, and they've always been understanding. And I'm blessed that I have two sons that are in my business, Mark and David, who are continuing to run the business and who do a better job than I do at it, I think. They do consult me at times on certain matters, but when I'm gone in Florida at my other home, believe me, they run the business, and mainly when we talk, it's strictly social to find out how they are and how I'm doing also. My other two sons have also been very fine and very supportive of what we've done, and that's Stephen and Bill. And my wife, of course, who has been very cooperative and has let me conduct meetings many a time at my home or at the synagogue or at the Jewish Community Center or other places, and have opened our home up to everyone, and she's always really done a great job. So I've been very, very blessed to have a family that has gone along with these endeavors that we've had, and really I think they've seen what Anna and I have done in the city and with the Jewish community, and I'm sure it'll carry forward through them.